Well, hello there, weary stranger. Why don't you come out of the cold and warm your hands on our pixelated fire? Me and my friend and traveling companion here in the age of information, that would be illegally blind. How are you doing tonight, brother?
Good man, how you been?
Oh, these are the days, but we're still grinding. As we warm our hands on our toasty little fire here, what's on your mind this holiday eve?
Just survival.
On the tip of survival, as you were a survivor of many apocalypses in our previous conversation, the MCO escape, what are you thinking about tonight? What sounds like a good resource around us?
I guess pine trees.
Hello.
Pine trees are pretty good.
Shall we get Pine Fresh up in here?
Sounds good.
Cringing it up. What's first? What are you thinking?
We can start with the base, the tree itself.
Oh, please do.
Few facts. Pine tree is a conifer tree. All that means is it produces cones. Conifer trees, cone. It's also an evergreen tree. Conifers are usually softwood, pretty easy to chop down and craft stuff. They're still used for construction or whatnot, but they're not hardwood. They're actually so soft that you can eat the tree itself, by the way.
Hmm.
So actually, every single thing on a pine tree is completely edible except for the bark. If you're gonna eat the wood, the inside under the bark, by the way, you would want to roast it until it's golden. You can also do so and then ground it up and turn it into a flour substitute to make bread, thicken soups.
Slow down with the freshness for a second. Let's say we're just casually starting to think about pine trees. I know that I have them around here in Southern California. They're pretty pervasive. What's a tip to identifying different pine trees, perhaps in your neighborhood?
I don't know much about identifying between, pine trees, but identifying pine trees itself is pretty easy because, they'll all have needles and cones. There's actually two types of cones that pine trees produce, and there's male and female cones. Everyone's very familiar with the female cones. Those are the ones that are hard and fall to the floor and have the seeds hidden within them. But not a lot of people are familiar with the male cones. When I say you can eat the cones, I'm talking specifically about the male, not the female, by the way. The female cones are way too hard for that. You can eat the seeds out of the female cones. And also, the males are the ones that hold the spores. So they release the spores into the air and go to different pine trees and get the pine cones pregnant.
I think speaking of the needles themselves, the most beneficial one that I encountered in my research would be the white pine tree. It started from the East Coast, but has been brought to the West Coast, Colorado, Utah, Montana, etc.
Oh, yeah.
One tip about that is the white pine. White has 5 letters. There's 5 needles to a cluster. If you find that, that's like green gold.
Yeah, the white pine is what they use for the Christmas tree.
Interesting to gift somebody such a useful tree at such a dark hour. You were mentioning about the many uses for the needle. Not only do they make a tea and a broth that some find to be a hidden source of vitamins, etc., but what are some of the practical uses for needles?
You can also turn them into a basket. I've seen people on YouTube with tutorials about making like pine needle baskets.
That feels like a
And
lot more patience than we have this little toasty fire for.
yeah,
Just to recap, so basically the pine tree, you identify its different types by the cluster of needles. The wood is edible in its right state. The needles can be turned to tea. It helps if you chop those needles in half. Is there anything about the pine nuts that we need to be aware of? Is that the male pine cones or the female?
the pine seeds actually come from the female cones only, and those are those little helicopter seeds basically when they're fully matured that you see falling to the ground in the helicopter fashion.
Mm-hmm.
And if you just grab, they don't have to be fully matured for you to be able to eat them. So if you just grab a female pine cone that's open, female pine cones will actually open and close just like a clam put out in the sun or put back in the water, depending on the temperature. And so if you find one that's open, you can just smack it against a rock and all these seeds will come out of it. If you find one that's closed and they're all closed, you can just tear it open, like in half and get it from the middle. And even though there will be seeds in the female pine cones, even when they're still green, which are still edible as well.
Got you. Does that involve any boiling or anything like that to get those
Nope.
ready? Okay.
No, you actually don't really, you honestly don't have to boil, cook, like anything to be able to eat the pine tree, like everything on it but the bark. But obviously for this type of stuff, because it's harder to digest, it would be better. Everything except the male pine cones and the pine seeds, I would say you should probably roast over fire or boil. Like the pine needles would probably be needed to be boiled, and the male pine cone is so soft that you could just eat that, how it is. It probably will
Fascinating.
taste better roasted as
I
well.
got you. I think that's about as much pine freshness as we can handle as casual folks. But I think a video like this is just to put this in your eye line as you're on your travels. And if you start profiling pine trees, you'll probably be the smartest person in the room. But aside from that, I know the pine cone in its perfection is often used in sacred symbology and stuff like that. Do you have a favorite usage on hand, illegally blind?
A favorite usage, I would say, is a fire starter. Female pine cones are great fire starters.
Mm,
It's probably the most common thing that everyone knows about them for as far as usage.
I got you. Okay, well then I'll close with just a couple symbolic facts. I'll earn my West Coast Sherlock badge down the stretch. It's worth mentioning that in all cultures, pine cones have symbolized, or at least some folks think they symbolize the pineal gland, which many people hold in high importance. It's been found in Mexican mythology. It's been found in Egyptian. One of my favorite uses is the Buddhas comb their hair up on both sides to pay homage to the pine cone, pineal gland. So there's a lot of uses out there. Once again, it's one of those things that our society hasn't put a whole lot of importance on. But with good friends like Illegally Blind here on the holidays, we can pine fresh it up. So I appreciate you dropping knowledge, brother. I know it's hard to get together in these times, but I appreciate you. Where can folks find you for the time being?
Twitter, illegally blind X. On YouTube, same thing, illegally blind X.
Until next time, keep it pine fresh, my friend. You feel me?
You as well.
All right. I'll catch you around the next Pixelated Fire. Cheers, guys.